Hello and welcome back to the Dante in a Year podcast. My name is Danny Fitzpatrick. Today we continue with Dante's Purgatorio, Canto 25. It was the hour in which the ascent did not allow delay, for the sun had left the circle of the meridian to Taurus and the night to Scorpio, so that, as does the man who doesn't flag but goes along his way whatever happens, as need's spur pierces him, so we entered on the narrow way, one before the other taking the stair that in its narrowness separates those who ascend. And like the little stork that lifts its wing for want of flight, and won't attempt to abandon the nest and lets it down, so was I with will inflamed to ask and spent, questions coming up to my face, which moved as his who readies his reasoning for speech. He didn't leave me for the swiftness of our way, my sweet father, but said, "Shoot the bow of speech, now drawn out to the iron." So assured, I opened my mouth and commenced. How can one be lean there where the need of nourishment can't reach? If you remind yourself how Meleager was consumed in the burning of a log, he said, this wouldn't so bitterly pierce you. And had you considered how, at your quivering, your image quivers within the mirror, this that seems hard would shrivel before you. But to ease the will within you, behold here Statius, and I call him and pray that he be now the healer of your wounds. If I unbind the eternal vision to him, responded Statius, here where you are, let my guilt be lifted by my inability to deny you. Then he commenced. If your mind, my son, looks on my words and receives them, they will illumine what you ask. Perfect blood, which isn't drunk by the thirsty veins and remains as that food that's taken from the table, bears from the heart to all man's members formative power as that which flows through the veins to make them. Once more digested, it descends to where it's better to be silent than to speak, and after that it's borne on another's blood into the natural vessel. There the one and the other are blended, the one disposed to receive and the other to give by the perfect place from which it's pressed. And, joined to it, it begins to operate, coagulating first and then enlivening that which it's made to consist for its matter. Having fashioned a soul, the active power, like a plant's, differing as much as that which is on the way differs from that already ashore, then functions thus, that now it moves and senses as a sponge in the sea, and then it proceeds to organize the powers to which it gives rise. Now it unfolds, my son, now is displayed the power that proceeds from the generative heart, where nature attends to all members. But how from animal it's made infant, you do not yet see. This is such a point as has made a man more sage than you err, so that in his doctrine the soul is disjoined from the possible intellect, because he could not see its proper organ. Open your breast to the truth that comes, and know that as soon as the articulation of the brain's perfected in the embryo, the prime mover turns to it, elated over nature's art, and breathes a new spirit, replete with power, which then takes up into its substance that which it finds there active, and fashions one soul alone that lives and senses and turns back upon itself. And that you might less marvel at my word, look to the heat of the sun, which makes itself wine when joined to the humor strained from the vines. When lachesis holds no further thread, it absolves itself of the flesh, and bears within itself virtues both human and divine. The other potencies also much muted, memory, intelligence, and will remain in many acts much sharper than at first. Without a moment's rest, of itself the same soul falls miraculously to one of the shores. There it first knows its own way. As soon as space circumscribes it there, the formative power ranges all around, and thus gives quantity to its living members. And as the air, when saturated by the rain, becomes adorned of diverse colors by another's rays it simply reflects, so the air near here is set in that form that remains and seals the soul in its power. And similarly then to the little flare that follows the fire there wherever it moves, its new form follows the spirit. So that which since has appeared here is called a shade, and therefore comes each organ needed to sense, even for sight. Thus we speak, and thus we smile. Thus we fashion the tears and the sighs you might have heard on the mountain. According to how we're afflicted with desire or the other affections, the shade is shaped. And this is the cause of that which made you marvel. And now we'd come to the last turning there was for us, And we turned to the right hand, and were attentive to another care. There the bank fires flames upward, and the cornice gives up breath that bends back and swells away from itself. Thus it fell to us to go along the open edge one by one, and I feared the fire here, and feared too that I would fall below. My leader said, "Through this place one should hold strict reins upon the eyes, for it would only take a bit to err." "Summae Deus clementiae," I heard chanted in the center of the grand blaze there, which made me no less eager to turn. And I saw spirits passing through the flame, so that I gazed at them and at my steps, dividing my vision between one and the other. After that hymn had been borne up to the end, they cried out, "Virum non cognosco." Then, in lowered voices, they began their hymn again. It was finished, and still they cried, "Diana held herself to the wood and hunted out Callisto, who had felt the brutal touch of Venus." Then they turned back to their song. Then they called the ladies and their spouses who'd been chaste as virtue and matrimony would wish. And this way, I believe, is enough for them for all the time that the fire brushes them. With such care and such food must the sixth of the wounds be drawn back out. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Dante in a Year podcast. See you next time for Dante's Purgatorio, Canto 26.